get below radar, please just raise your hand so I can get back up again, the mic again. So before we start, we actually, all of us wanted to know a little bit more about you. We wanted to know who's in the room, and I'm wondering if you could just raise your hands if you're a legal professional. And how about a social work psychology professional? Any other type of advocate? Curious, what kind of advocates are you?
Affordable housing.
Uh-huh. And affordable housing and racism. And students? Any students? Okay. And anyone else? So I guess more of you are lawyers than I thought. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Housing developers.
Housing developers. Great. Okay, thank you. And a little off-the-wall question. How many of you are from the Twin Cities, grew up in the Twin Cities? And how many of you grew up on the East Coast?
Yeah, we saw homelessness back in the 60s and 70s.
How many on the West Coast? Several. South? Other Midwest? Okay, a lot of other Midwest. Great. Anyone I missed? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. So when we were thinking about what kind of difficulties that we can have when we're working with pro bono clients or clients in poverty, the types of challenges that we identified pretty much fell within these 8 categories. And so we're going to cover, most of what we're going to cover will be about these 8 categories. Whoops. Where we're starting, we're actually going to be really focusing on class. We're not going to be focusing so much on race, so much on sex or age or anything like that, but really focusing on class in order to try to tease that out of other kind of isms. We know that's a little artificial, but I think it will help us kind of focus in and make our points. The sources for the presentation are our experiences and those of our colleagues. I think we have maybe 50-plus years of experience among us. We will be making generalizations, and we want to say right up front, we don't believe in generalizations. They're not true of anybody, and certainly not of a whole group of people, but sometimes they can be helpful in terms of just talking about something, naming it so that we can discuss it. And we also, I guess as we've all alluded to, we believe that when we're representing someone in poverty, and specifically in generational poverty, which is when they have 2 generations of their family has been in poverty, that we're engaging in a cross-cultural relationship. And as the professionals, it's our responsibility to do a number of things. We need to know that we're in a cross-cultural relationship. We need to see and suspend our human tendency to judge. And I think this is so critical and so instantaneous and so human. I don't think the problem is that we have judgments, and maybe some of you will disagree with me, but I think the problem is when we can't identify our judgments so that we can choose whether or not to believe them. I think we need to learn enough about the other culture to know how we can be respectful and accommodating, proactively sidestep common communication barriers. That's especially with people in poverty who may have maybe come from a different culture, oral versus print, and then have specific tools in our toolbox, many tools, many different tools that some will work sometimes, some will work other times, but it's good to have a lot. So I'd like to ask you a question. What would you do in these situations? What would you do, for example, if a friend of yours came up to you and asked you for some money? Or if you had a dog and the dog had bitten someone twice. The second occasion the dog had bitten someone. I think that if you came from generational poverty, your answers might be a little bit different than if you come from middle class. And that is because I believe the driving factors can be different if we come from middle class versus poverty versus wealth. And this is at least some of what I've read and some of what I've been to other presentations and some of what I've personally felt to be true or experienced to be true. The driving forces, and why are they different? Maybe because of different experiences, different skills, different fears, different things that harmed us in our childhood. I grew up in middle class. I had a brief stint in situational poverty when my parents were divorced. And if I were to answer the question, what would I do if a friend asked me for money, I'd kind of think about it. I'd be like, why do you need money? I wouldn't say this, but I would think, were you not responsible with your money, or did something happen? Or I would question it just a little bit. There'd be a bit of a judgment in there. If I had a dog who bit someone twice, I would feel sad, but I would put that dog down. Someone in poverty with those same questions would probably answer them or may answer them differently. If they needed someone to ask them for money, they might say yes without really thinking about asking why, because in their experience, if someone asks for money, it's usually pretty important, pretty necessary. And what's really frustrating to us as lawyers is that may be the rent money that they were going to use to pay for the issue that we've been helping them with and gathering evidence about, and now they've given away their rent money, so what are we going to do about their case? But from their perspective, that friend is probably going to be around for them in the future, probably going to help bail them out again in the future, whereas we certainly are not going to be around for them for very long. And that apartment, it's not their experience, they're going to be living in that apartment for very long. So, you know, different reasons that we just, in our experience, it's like, why would you have done that after all the work I've done? Or the dog bite. This actually happened to, this was an interaction that happened at one of our clinics where a woman came in and she had a dog and the dog had bitten someone. It was a dangerous dog. And our volunteers said, trying to be respectful, trying to not be too judgmental, said something like, why would you keep such a dog? I mean, you have there are children around here. And the woman said, well, anyone guess what she said? Yep. I need that dog to protect me. That dog protects me. I didn't think of that. I would not have thought about that in that situation. So it's just good to be able to step back every now and then and to see that some of the reasons for the decisions can be different. And if we knew the perspectives, we might judge them less. So there are many courses on intercultural communication for people doing business between countries, you know, like here in France or Germany or Japan. And even with that, apparently I've read that 70% of intercultural businesses fail because of that difference in communication. And that's pretty scary to me because we really don't want 70% of our representation of people in poverty to fail. And so I think we all hope that. And I think it's a little bit also like a book that I read recently. Have any of you heard of the book Love Languages? Not anyone? Not too many people? Some people? It's really interesting. I think it's an interesting book. It talks about how all of us have certain ways in which we are more comfortable in giving or in either giving or receiving love. And if we are with a partner, for example, who does it in a different way, we can have some, you know, problems like in their way of expressing. I have a cousin who has 6 sons, and she read this book, and she said she thought it was so true that her sons, she could really see how this language was better for this son and that language was better for another son. And so the 5, just so you know, it's kind of an interesting thing. The 5 are acts of service, words of affirmation, touch, quality time, and gifts. So if you are trying to express love to someone by giving them gifts and they want quality time, you're going to need to have some kind of you're going to have to make something explicit, basically, in order to avoid some hard feelings or miscommunication. So I'd like to give a couple of quick examples of how cross-cultural relationships can derail. And I've got a couple of examples from my own life. This is a trivial example. I'm from the East Coast. I grew up in Boston. And I can tell you the first time that I disagreed with my supervisor in a staff meeting. You would think I had slapped someone across the face. Nobody responded to me. People looked away. People moved on. My very good comment was completely ignored. And I got I kind of realized that this was not an effective way for me to express my disagreement. And unless I learned to approach conflict differently here, I'm not going to be effective. But I think what's even more important is seeing and overcoming what to me seems to be a very human tendency, not good, not bad, to be biased against what is different. So those of you who are from the East Coast, if you could help me out for a moment, and tell me, how do people from the East Coast refer to people from Minneapolis?
Nice.
Minnesota nice? Oh, I've heard people say stuff at the bus stop. Passive-aggressive. You know, they'll be nice to you to your face, but then they stab you in the back when you're not looking. They don't know how to deal with conflict. Conflict avoidant. But to be fair to you who are from Minnesota, how do people from Minnesota refer to people from the East Coast? well, yeah, abrasive, they're rude, we're in your face, we don't know how to act. You know, who taught us manners? Not talking to that person. I've had people avoid, I don't know about people who've avoided me, but I know people who've avoided other people from the East Coast because it was like, wow, they don't really know how to behave. So if we don't realize that we're doing this, I mean, if we don't realize not only that we're judging people for being different, if we don't realize we're judging people for being different, we, I think, will be held hostage by our bias. And it will lead us to do things that we really won't be proud of. It can prevent us from being really successful from each other. I guess I forgot to advance that. So here's not as trivial an example, again, a true story from my life. We offer, at VLN, we offer a service where we will draft answers for people in poverty who have been sued, debt collection lawsuits. And I was at a workshop, and a client came in, and I have to admit I didn't like him very much. He was rude. I thought he was he was loud. He was didn't listen to me. He interrupted me, a little bit in my face, and you know, whatever. I kind of got my head around the facts. I did the answer. I gave him advice. I gave him the advice and sent him on his way, and that was it. The next week, I was at the same, this is a true story. The next week, I was at the same service, and a woman walks in. She was really nice. She was deferential. She didn't interrupt me. She acted like she wanted to hear what I had to say. And I did what I had to do. I figured out the facts. I gave her advice, and I sent her on her way. The next day, I realized that I'd spent 45 minutes with the first client, and I had spent over 2 hours with the second client. If we don't see and question our judgments, they will derail our representations. We will end up providing inferior services to people who are different from us. What I wish I had done is seen what was going on inside me, that I was kind of panicking a little bit. I'm an only child, so that might have been part of it, you know, keep your distance. But calm myself down and seen him as a human being worthy of helping, regardless of how he was asking for it. So if we can see that the other person may be playing by a different set of rules, we can start to see how we may need to be explicit about some of our rules. And if I had been representing that client on a long-term basis, I probably would have had a conversation with him about, you know, well, one of two things. One thing I would think is I'd have a conversation about kind of some things that could help me be more comfortable. But as someone more intelligent than I recommended, no, you would actually find out what would make him comfortable, and you might even change a little bit of your style to match his. But in any event, when I came here, someone might have sat down with me after that meeting and said, you know, in Minnesota, we don't address conflict that way. You know, we don't really do, or at least maybe in this office, we don't necessarily, you know, disagree with our supervisor openly. Maybe we do it privately, or maybe we do it in a different way, but that's not how we do it, to help me learn the rules that would help me succeed here. And it's the same with our clients. If they're used to playing ice hockey, and we're used to playing baseball, and they try to play ice hockey in the courts, which play baseball, they're not going to do very well. And so we need to make explicit to our clients the rules of the courts, the rules of baseball, otherwise they're not going to do very well. And I don't see this as teaching them how to act. I don't see this as we're going to teach you how to be, you know, the right way. Because frankly, if I were going to be in a neighborhood of poverty, I would need someone to be teaching me some of the rules of how to survive, how to walk down the street without getting accosted, maybe, you know, having a dog. It's not what's better, it's what needs to happen in order to survive. And when we're representing a client, the power in that representation is in the baseball field. So this is one of my favorite bumper stickers. Don't believe everything you think. And it's true. It's true. I find myself on my way to work, I will be noticing the length of someone's hems on their pants as I'm walking to my office, and I will notice myself judging people based on that. Now, I know I'm not the only one that makes those types of trivial judgments. I know that And it's not about feeling bad about those judgments. I really don't think it is. I think it's about catching them and choosing what to do about them. I don't think, we have judgments from our parents, we have judgments from the media, we have judgments from TV, we have judgments from society. Who knows all these influences that are acting upon us as social beings. But really, we need to be able to identify them and decide whether or not to act on them. So down to some nuts and bolts about poverty, and many of this will not be news to you. I often ask people, how many in the audience have heard of the Federal Poverty Guidelines? I don't think I'll ask this audience, because I bet most of you have. The Federal Poverty Guidelines are the nationwide standard for measuring poverty and determining eligibility for assistance programs. The Federal Poverty Guidelines for a family of 4 is $23,550. That's for 2013. They were just updated. How does a family of 4 live on $23,000 a year? With my skills, I could not do that. I would need to learn new skills. I'm guessing most people in this room think that's understated. It doesn't express how many people are just getting by or how many people are not. They're homeless. I don't know why this hasn't been updated since it was developed. I have a theory that no president wants to be the one under whose watch the rate of poverty doubles because he changes the definition of poverty. But that level of poverty is so low that our programs use double that amount to say who's eligible for our services. I mean, it's just so low. I know I don't have to. What percentage of people in the United States live in poverty according to that understated definition, do people think? This group might guess too high. 14% of people in the country. 14% of the people in this country live. 20% of children. I think everybody in this room is horrified by that. I know that's why you're here. What are we doing to our future with 20% of children living at that level? If you know people in which the households are getting $100,000 a year, and I think many of us in this room do know people, or maybe we ourselves, that we're in the top 20%. We're in the top 20%. We are the wealthy in this country. I don't think we often think that way, but we are. So living in poverty, the budget for a person in poverty, housing, utilities, transportation, food, child care, you pay those essentials. Those are pretty modest amounts, and you're over budget by $176, and you haven't paid for many things that are pretty essential, which for me just really emphasizes that when we're working with people in poverty, they are not paying their essential bills all the time. They are alternating which essential bills they are paying.